Excited. And we will get started in just a few minutes. We'll give folks some time to enter. I don't have any background music queued up for you. So thanks everyone for introducing yourselves in the chat. It looks like our Midwest representation is strong here today, which is fun. It's good to see some familiar faces from Linden. Hello. All right. Well, I see another familiar face in here. What a joy. This week is just kicking off to be so much fun. We had our first National Co-Housing Week event yesterday, had a huge crowd, and this is our second, and I'm really excited. So we will jump in. We know that there will be people entering throughout, but I'll just start by saying welcome, everyone. My name is Trish Becker. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the executive director of the Co-Housing Association of the US. And you are here at the second event of the first ever National Co-Housing Week, and it has been such a joy. So this week we will have free virtual events all week, and then this weekend is open house weekend. So right now we have 85, I think, events nationwide where communities are either opening their literal doors or hosting virtual events so that you can learn more about communities all over the country and get to know what co-housing is all about. So for those of you just joining us, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. If you have questions, thoughts, reflections, use that chat. It's a nice place for folks to connect throughout the course of the event. I want to give a huge thank you to our co-organizers. If you're here, you probably know them. They're Mr. and Mr. Co-Housing, Rains Cohen and Neil Planchon. Give a little wave. Big thanks to them. They've offered lots of support and wisdom and have been working on open houses for many, many years. So thanks for co-creating this with me. It's been a joy. So with that, I am going to turn it over to our board president, who's also a founding member of Linden Co-Housing in Madison, Wisconsin, Lori Frank. And Lori, you're
I am muted, yes. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for coming to the Midwest for a day. I get to run us through a whole lot of information about Coho US. Coho US is a national nonprofit that seeks to advance co-housing and shift the culture toward a new paradigm where every home is surrounded by caring, culture, collaborative neighbors who use less of the earth's resources while living an abundant life. We do this in three ways: through education, using events, a learning platform, newsletters, and social media to help people understand, build, and support co-housing and its impacts; advocacy for co-housing through outreach, research, and publications; and networking between past, future, and current co-housers and our allies. We are made up of a small but passionate staff and a wide network of volunteers, board advocates, and communitarians. Next. Thank you. And we are now the second in a whole week of activities around the National Co-Housing Week. It's the first annual with events all week long. If you miss any or can't make it to the live session, all events will be recorded and available on the Co-Housing Institute. The Co-Housing Week culminates with Open House Weekend, May 3rd and 4th, with over 85 events across the country. Check out our open house page to see what events are near you or are virtual. And today we're gathering for a Midwest Spotlight and presentation on co-housing adjacent models. We will hear from representatives of regional groups in the Midwest and then dive into community-rooted housing with Sarah Wells. And the next, thanks. Uh, and join us after the open house weekend to celebrate and share stories. This is an after party. It will be an open format opportunity for sharing photos, videos, and tales from our own events, whether you hosted or attended. No registration is required. And mark your calendar with this link, and we'll see you on Sunday at 5 p.m. Pacific time and 7 p.m. Central time. Thank you. And our next event on the Co-Housing Institute is on affordable and ecological co-housing design with the co-founder of Co-Housing in the US, Chuck Durrett. You can learn more at the link that is being put in the chat. Thank you. And save the date for Co-Housing and Beyond. This is an in-person gathering in Sacramento, California, exploring many types of collaborative neighborhoods. We'll have breakout sessions, plenaries, and networking opportunities designed to support you on your co-housing journey, as well as local community tours on October 31st and November 1st. And I believe this is the first regional event that's hosted by Coho US in a long time, an in-person event. All right. And finally, join us at the Commons. This happens every month. For people who are curious about co-housing, you can learn the basics of co-housing and other community-rooted housing models and connect with others. It's a gathering space for co-housing newbies and veterans alike, and it's a great place to connect with other communitarians like yourself. The 10th of every month at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. And there is a link as well for that. All right. And we are shifting culture, and each of you are a part of that transformation. We need you to be a part of the movement for a more connected, resilient, sustainable, and democratic future. We're a small organization with a big heart. And as a small nonprofit with a big vision, we need your support to continue to grow community-rooted housing nationwide. Please consider supporting us with a donation of money, time, or expertise. A small monthly donation can make a huge impact. And click the link in the chat or use the QR code to learn more about how you can support co-housing on a national scale.
Thanks, Lori. And I'm just going to pop in here to tell you all a little bit about a new member deal that we're offering. So this is to celebrate National Co-Housing Week. It's the biggest discount we've ever offered on our membership programs. So first, let me tell you about membership. Membership is an annual program that gives all members free virtual programming all year long. So for example, that affordable and sustainable program with Chuck Durrett that Lori just mentioned, there's programs like that on the Co-Housing Institute all year long, and members have free access to that. They also receive 25% off of our multi-week courses and our in-person events like that Sacramento event, like our national conferences, etc. And then members have access to hundreds of recorded trainings, events, and sessions on pretty much every topic that you can imagine about building, sustaining co-housing. So there's just a wealth of trainings available for all members. So usually that's $150 a year for individuals. Right now we're offering that for $100 a year. That is less than $10 a month. If you're part of a community and have more than 5 people, we offer those same benefits as a community package with an unlimited number of uses. So usually that's $750 a year, but right now we're offering it for only $500. So again, membership benefits for your entire community, no limit for a whole year for $500. And then we have a program called Community Launch. that's designed specifically for forming communities. So it includes all of those membership benefits, plus lots of marketing and outreach, because we know that forming communities are most focused on meeting the neighbors of their future. And so we help them with those outreach efforts. Usually that's $1,500 a year. And right now it's only $1,000 a year. So this is for new members only. The links are in the chat. And then we will post them again at the end of the event. But please consider joining us as a member if you haven't already. We would love for you to be part of our work. Back to you, Lori.
Great, thanks. Let's get to our regional reps. Next slide, please. Okay, first I'd like to introduce Becca Brackett, who is representing the Twin Cities Co-Housing Network. Becca is a retired family doctor. She's from the Boston area and describes herself as a descendant of uninvited, undocumented English invaders to the North American continent. Becca is a member of Cedar Co-Housing Community and is part of the Vision Circle of the Twin Cities Co-Housing Network, now doing business as Co-Housing MN. Off to you, Becca. And you are muted as well now.
Well, thank you very much, Lori. I wanted to start with our highlight, and I see that it's the Twin Cities Family Cooperative Co-Housing, and it has been started by Becca Herzog and her mother, Nancy Hamlet. And the highlight is that they've bought a building. Their main goal was to move fast to live in community. Becca's children are growing, and the family wanted to be in community with other young families as soon as possible. So their solution was they've purchased a 7-unit rental building near the University of Minnesota, where they will two units they will occupy right away, and then they will add members as student renters move out. So then next, I wanted to tell our story. And my story is of the Twin Cities Co-Housing Network itself. We're a 501c3 and a clearinghouse, as I'm saying there, and we have a theme now of catalyzing co-housing. And with Becca and Nancy, it's actually something's happening. It formed as a nonprofit in the early 1990s and was an umbrella organization. And one specific co-housing community, the Monterey, actually was spawned by the TCCN. Unfortunately, as the most active burning souls from the network peeled away to work on their own Monterey project, the network itself kind of faded out. But in 2016, Chuck Durrett came and gave a co-housing talk attended by 140 people. And that enabled the TCCN to be revived and appealed to the IRS to get our status of nonprofit back, and began doing common dinners, potlucks, lectures, and a number of small common interest groups formed. But only one of those forming groups is still around, and that's my group called Cedar, but we haven't purchased anything yet. So during COVID times, TCCN pivoted, as everyone else, to Zoom sessions and a series called Meet the Professionals to have co-housing experts on Zoom addressing Minnesotans. That included Karen Gimnig, Ann Zabaldo, and Grace Kim. So about Monterey, it was established, I think, around 1993, they renovated a 1920s nursing home, which was a big brick mansion. That created 7 units, and then later they built an addition of for townhomes. And actually this year, at the moment, they are expecting a vacancy for a 3-bedroom townhomes. If anyone wants to move to Minneapolis, they're a really great group. So now some events that's going on in here. Well, the Twin Cities Family Co-op that I mentioned above, they are having a work and moving days, they're having a week just like we're having a week of doing the prep on their building before they move in. So my group Cedar is having a walk and talk where we're at a park. We were formed with our mission of energy efficient, urban transit oriented community. but recently a contact with a developer of senior co-op housing seems like it might be a fruitful combination. So that's what Cedar's doing. And in River Falls, Wisconsin, Kinney Co-housing has been started by Christina Marshall and Alistair Townsend. She is a marketing expert from the senior housing business side, and Alistair Townsend is an architect and developer. And they both have gone through Katie McCamit's 500 Communities course, so they're probably going to do just great. And their webpage is beautiful, and I'm sure the river is beautiful too, although I haven't been there. So they have a few properties that they're considering, and they're actively recruiting. They're having monthly welcome sessions. I didn't see a specific date, but I know they're coming if you look on their website. So the Twin Cities Co-housing Network, our next event is our July picnics. We have one in St. Paul and one in Duluth, because we got a new infusion of talent and energy when a Duluth resident, Lee Pedersen, joined our board. This led us to seek a wider mission, and in 24, we changed our mission to include all of Minnesota and the adjacent counties in Wisconsin that are part of the Census Bureau's metropolitan area definition. They have all their definitions. So she has a goal of establishing a senior co-housing community in Duluth. So her project is the Active Adult Co-housing for the Northland, and she's great. So, and Duluth is considering converting some of the downtown office buildings into housing, and that would be perfect opportunity to have some intentional community groups, especially seniors. I just saw an article that said that St. Louis County that Duluth is part of has a higher percentage of seniors in the state compared to all the counties in Minnesota. So contacts, how to get involved. So this slide has all the web addresses of those groups. And if on our webpage, tccoho.org, we do list the groups that are forming. And we've decided to have a groups.io site to try to have a little discussion that's more Minnesota based, as opposed to Cohousing-L, which is national, and my sidekick over here, my husband, runs that. So I do have a few items outside of Minnesota. And one of them is Iowa City in Iowa. And I think they've been open for about 5 years, and they are anticipating some vacancies as well. And their site is quite a hill. That's when their name. And you can imagine the difficulty of building on a slope. However, it does have the advantage that their 2-story common house has an level, no steps entrance on the top level and the bottom level, but they have an inside elevator and stair just in case. But and their driveway is steep, and the sidewalk along with it, but all the other walkways are ADA compliant in terms of gentle slopes. But evidently you don't have to have your driveway be ADA compliant, only your walkways. So the other thing is Oak Park Commons, which is Illinois' first co-housing community. They are building and expect occupancy in the fall of 2025. So I think that's all I have to say.
Excellent. Thank you, Becca. And our next presenter is from Madison, Wisconsin, who is also named Becca. And if you can go to the next slide, please. Madison has 4 co-housing communities right now. If you click on each of these logos, I don't know if you're going to get this whole thing, but if you click on the logos, it'll take you to a fact sheet about each community. So hopefully we can send those to you or something. But I'd like to introduce our next Becca Schwartz, who's representing the Madison, Wisconsin area co-housing communities and the network that is just being started. Becca lives with her 10-year-old son, Oliver, at Village Co-housing Community in Madison. They've lived there for nearly 6 years. and Becca is currently serving as co-president of their board. Becca has recently been working with other area co-housing members to create more community among the existing and forming communities in the Madison area. So I'll hand it off to you, Becca.
Thank you, Lori. Hello, everyone. This is my first time presenting at something like this, so bear with me. I am representing, like Lori said, the Madison area co-housing communities who, less than a year ago, we formed more officially the Madison Co-housing Network. And so that is made up of Village Co-housing, where I live, Troy Gardens Co-housing, Arboretum Co-housing, and Linden. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of a timeline. Village Co-housing, we celebrated our 25th anniversary last year. We were built in 1999. I've only been living here for 6 years, though. Troy Gardens was established in 2006. Arboretum Co-housing was established in 2008, and Linden opened in 2019. And it's really interesting to visit each of the communities because you can see how one learned from the next to the point where Linden is, fully accessible and has all of these great things that we sadly don't have, but we get by as the older community. Next slide, please. So when I came on board, I was aware of all 4 co-housing communities, yet there wasn't anything official, any kind of official interaction happening. And I saw, and some of us saw the benefit that there could be from having more official interaction. I think there's a lot of unofficial interaction, people know each other and call each other, email each other, but there was nothing really official happening. So we started, of course, with a potluck and a meeting back in September. And we decided, we wanted to check in to see, what is it that people would like to get out of this and how often should we meet and that sort of thing. So we decided to meet quarterly with a meeting and a potluck. The meeting is open to anyone who wants to attend, and as is the potluck, and it's been really great. So I guess I've started with the third bullet. I apologize. So we also thankfully have 1 or 2 forming communities. I'm not exactly sure what steps they're at because I think that there was 1 and then people split off and now there's 2, which I think is probably relatively common. But they have been participating in our quarterly meetings as well. The meetings have been really, really useful. We're talking about how we can support each other, how we can talk through challenges such as member non-participation. We're all hoping to find a way to reduce our insurance costs, which I'm sure people can relate to on this call. But it feels really good to be able to talk to people who are living in a similar situation and are, I'm sure, facing similar challenges, and we celebrate together too. Just to give you an example of some of the skills and knowledge that we're planning to share, our neighbor Arboretum Co-housing has a car share program that they've been working on, and some evangelists for that. And they have offered to come speak to each co-housing community about their car sharing and how great it is. So that's just one example. Another example of what we're talking about doing is potentially forming a nonprofit together. So Becca Brackett, we might be getting in touch with you about your nonprofit to see how it works. And as I said earlier, we're seeking solutions to common challenges and potentially looking to establish best practices. Another interesting thing that we've talked about is a sort of collective bargaining. Could we bargain as for communities together for reducing the price of certain services like window washing or vent cleaning, that sort of thing? And we haven't started that yet, but it's something that we've been talking about. So wait, one more, go back. So I wanted to talk about a highlight specifically at VCC. Um, we started in 1999, and our founders were um, very enthusiastic about making housing affordable, and they did so through personal loans, zero interest loans to members. And while it was extremely generous and it enabled people who may not have otherwise been able to afford buying in to do so, it is only affordable for that one generation, really, and then the affordability isn't permanent. So we recently started working with the Madison Area Community Land Trust, and they had funding to purchase one of our units that the founders themselves were generous enough to bequeath to us on their passing, which was really, again, super generous. And so we were able to sell at a below market rate in order to make that unit permanently affordable. And we closed on that 2 weeks ago. So that's pretty exciting for us. I think that all of the other co-housing communities do have some sort of permanently affordable housing built in, and we hadn't yet, but now we do. So that's exciting. Next slide. So we're going to be continuing with the quarterly meetings, which if anyone is in town and wants to join, I'm sure that they would be welcome. Our next one is in, Lori, do you have that off the top of your head? I think our next one is in June, but I'll put my email here in case anyone's interested. We are also coordinating a citywide co-housing open house on May 3rd. The main event will be at Linden Co-housing, and that will be from 10 to 2. And during that time, there will also be people available to give tours of all of the 3 other existing co-housing communities. And we will be having VCC, Village Co-housing, will be having a celebratory potluck on May 9th, the evening of May 9th, to celebrate our relationship with the land trust and making that unit permanently affordable. So the story that I wanted to share is I have 2 stories. So we have a new generation of co-housers, and what I mean by that is the next generation of co-housing owners. So Troy Gardens, they had a family who I believe the parents of the family have moved out and moved into senior living, and the son has purchased the home and is staying there. So that was paralleled by a story at Village Co-housing where again, a young family lived here and for a number of years and then moved to another home in our same community. And the daughter, now a young adult, and her partner have since purchased a unit and moved back in. So I think that says a lot about co-housing and how people really value it their whole lives. How to get involved. I think that I think Lori thankfully added some links, but we can add links in here too for all of the different co-housing communities in Madison. You can attend our open house if you're in the area. Unfortunately, we didn't plan to make it virtual. It's only in person. But please come and visit Madison. We're just like the Twin Cities, where it's coming to the time where it's really lovely to visit. So, and let us know if you're here.
Excellent. Thank you, Becca. Um, I did want to highlight one other community in Wisconsin, the River Trails Commons. It's the newest community. Demolition is happening right now. It started in March, and Nola Hitchcock Cross and a group have been working on this for years. And I wanted to lift up this project because it's not only the first co-housing community in Milwaukee, but it's an example of how co-housing is evolving. If you watch the news story, and there's a link there, if you watch that, you're going to see racial, cultural, and economic diversity that is, up to now, rather uncommon in the U.S. co-housing world. The River Trail Group has been worked for a long time to nurture relationships and bring people together toward the dream of making this community a reality. And next slide, please. And Coho US is committed to supporting the development of a wide variety of communities, and I'm pleased to introduce Sarah Wells, our speaker on co-housing adjacent models, or a term I learned from Sarah, community-rooted housing. Sarah's a Coho US board member and is passionate about empowering people and businesses through ownership. She enthusiastically jumped into real estate in 2015 after she and her partner transformed a 5,000 square foot house in Denver into the democratically run and cooperatively owned Queen City Cooperative. As a real estate agent and community housing developer, Sarah has supported dozens of groups in buying homes together. She currently serves as the board's president for Boulder Housing Coalition in Colorado and was inducted into the Co-op Hall of Fame in 2024. Her previous background includes nonprofit and sustainability, as well as marketing and community relations. So it's no surprise that she loves enfranchising artists, activists, and entrepreneurs through property ownership. Considered a national expert in collective living, co-buying, and a champion for housing innovation, Sarah thrives in finding creative solutions and spaces for all. Welcome, Sarah.
Thanks, Lori. Hi, everybody. It's been so cool to hear these different projects and innovations that are coming up in the Midwest. I feel particularly excited about the family co-op in the apartment building. Really cool to hear about. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. Is my screen showing up okay?
Mhm.
Awesome. Cool. So Laura gave me a beautiful introduction, but I'll just ground us a little bit in who I am. So I've been living in a cooperative home in Denver for the last 10 years in Queen City Cooperative. My partner and I were not married at the time that we bought the property. We'd known each other for 18 months before jumping into that endeavor. And we now are raising our almost 6-year-old in that home, and he's been growing up in community with us. It's been really exciting. I also served on the Group Living Advisory Committee here in Colorado. We've been changing some rules at the city and then the state level around unrelated people and how they are allowed to live together. And I've been in Denver a long time. I practice real estate through, oh, come on. There we go. I practice real estate through Live Work Denver. So I am a real estate agent that focuses on supporting groups of people and purchasing property together that they would not otherwise be able to afford alone. And I think my root in that story really came from taking ownership of the house that would become Queen City Cooperative and seeing just how much wealth can come from market rate appreciation and learning so much about how we really relate to homeownership as the primary wealth creation tool in the United States, and then how that can also lead to greater stability, opportunities for abundance, and decided to really take that knowledge into the real estate realm and support more people in living in community together and finding ways to do that affordably. So what follows is a little bit of a sampling of the work and the concepts that I do. First, we're going to talk a little bit about why this work or this community-rooted work is needed. So why do we need more of a landscape around community housing? This is the bummer news, so we're going to do this part first and get out of the way, and then the rest of the time we'll talk about more inspiring things. But one of the elements that's at play in our access to housing is that the cost of housing has outpaced wages by a factor of 3 to 1 in the United States in recent years. So this black line at the bottom is our median household income. You can see it has not changed very much in the last 50 years, whereas the average home value has increased significantly, right? So that has also impacted how old people are when they're first able to access homeownership. So in 1970, it was possible to buy your first home on average at the age of 25, potentially with just one income. And now sorry, this number is updated from 2024 is actually the first time home buyer age is 38. So it's gone up since 2019. And what we then see when that happens is if you're buying your first home at 38 instead of 25, you have significantly less time to be building that equity and appreciation, which means that your options at the age of retirement are more limited because you have not been gaining wealth through your property for that time. And a lot of what I do, so a lot of the people that I work with are first time home buyers, or maybe they're trading up from their first home or their condo in order to fulfill some community housing dream. But for a lot of first time home buyers, there's this feeling that they should have already gotten here, right? That it should have been easier for them. Like they graduated college, they got a job, they're managing their student loans. Why is this not accessible? And so I think just seeing some of this really helps to eliminate some of that shame because we're working in a system that doesn't doesn't support that happening. There are also some race elements at play when we look at access to housing. I won't spend too much time here. I think we have a lot of housing nerds in the room, so probably already some knowledge about redlining and the effect of redlining. But for those who aren't familiar, the Federal Housing Authority created zones where it was not possible to give loans to people. And those zones also happen to be neighborhoods that were primarily people of color, primarily Black families, that really led to a separation of who was allowed to own in the United States. And we see that actually translate into really long-term impacts in terms of access to wealth and access to ownership. So you can see here the percentage of white owners versus Black owners in the American households, and then some information here on how accessible it is by age, right? So we see a lot of owners, in the older age ranges, a lot of owners who are married, not as many in the Black and Brown communities, and not as much ownership for young people. So uh, it's difficult, right, to own a home now. It's not, the system is not set up to make it easy. And so and we see that, so if your parents owned a home, then you are more likely to own a home. So we see that transfer of generational wealth or lack of transfer of generational wealth persist as we move through time, right? So we see a much more significant wealth inequality between white families as we do between Black and Brown families. And not having access to that wealth is also what makes it less possible to have access to a down payment, to qualify for financing of a home. And so really needing innovation in how we access ownership, I think, is an important element to consider when looking at how do we make housing more generative and accessible to people. Okay, so I'm in Denver, Colorado, where the median home price is $600,000. I have heard stories of the Midwest that have significantly lower housing prices. So my hope is that this number is not as high for many of you. But in Colorado, we've seen a really consistent uprise in housing prices. And what that means is that we need at least 2 incomes to purchase the median home price in Colorado. And that means that especially as people are getting married later in life or choosing not to partner, that we need to find other ways for people to come together in community. So that's the end of the that's the end of the sad story, but I just want to give a little bit of, I think it's useful to have some context for what got us here, and also to understand that just telling people about co-housing or just telling people about ownership is often not enough to encourage action, that there are actually a lot of barriers in place for people. And so part of what we need to do is look at the system of what is happening and how can we find new ways to provide access. So first I'll talk a little bit about what co-ops are and the different types of community housing that are kind of in our current landscape. So these two are more of the like status quo landlord-based options. So a rental collective or a co-living environment, or sometimes also called house hacking, is where someone will own a property and then rent out the individual bedrooms at a maximized market rate. The landlord is the one in those cases that is assigning rooms, and the ownership of the building stays with the landlord as opposed to being distributed to the other members. A lot of people lived in college this way, right? So having roommates, sort of the standard roommate scenario is the co-living or rental collective model. And then we also have market rate cooperatives. Market rate co-ops are more prevalent in the Northeast and in parts of the California and the Northwest, where we essentially, when we started to divide larger, more dense communities or started to build multifamily housing, some states went in the direction of cooperatives and incentivized a cooperative structure, and some states went in the direction of condos and use a condo structure. So a market rate cooperative is usually a building in which there are apartments or apartment style housing, but the legal structure is a cooperative and the apartment that you own is a share. So those are bought and sold on the open market, don't usually have significant shared agreements or intentionality, but is certainly varied. There are some apartment complexes that use a co-op structure and do include some more intentional shared meals work. We also have nonprofit cooperatives. Student cooperatives also fall into this category. So there are lots of student co-ops in the Midwest. It was really like propagated well by the university systems there, particularly in Michigan. But we have nonprofit co-ops that are usually subsidized and require either that you be a student or require that you meet a certain income criteria. So these are affordable cooperatives. Nonprofit co-ops are also sometimes called zero equity cooperatives, meaning that the equity stays with the organization and is not distributed to the individual members. So in this case, the residents are renters, but they have a form of figurative ownership in the structure. So in nonprofit co-ops, almost always the members choose each other. So if someone applies and it's the other members that facilitates that approval process, they also have shared labor systems. So they'll have chore accountability as well as shared food, and almost always some form of democratic governance. And this is a picture of Chrysalis Cooperative in Boulder, Boulder Housing Coalition, a group of which I'm a member and serve on their board, now has 6 cooperatives that they run throughout Colorado. And so some of the pros of nonprofit cooperatives, it creates a community culture with a really low barrier to entry for residents. So you can join a community co-op or a nonprofit co-op without needing to put in a down payment, and you get the benefits of and the connection of living in community. There is a lot of sharing and there is often a lot of structure. So, you know, I think living in a cooperative home, we're often sharing dining space, and on a daily basis we're also sharing kitchen space for every meal. We're sharing bathrooms with each other a lot of the time, and so that requires more structure and more clarity around agreements for how things are going to be maintained and run. One of the cons of nonprofit co-ops is that there tends to be a lot more turnover, right? So if people aren't rooted in a form of ownership, then there tends to be a more transient nature. I think that's especially true in communities that have nonprofit co-ops in college towns, just because the nature of that turnover is more significant in college communities. And then there's no financial ownership or no appreciation that comes from a nonprofit co-op. Uh, the next type of property around collectives or co-ops is a limited equity cooperative. I'm biased toward limited equity cooperatives because that's the method or the container that we chose for Queen City. Limited equity is sort of a compromise between market rate cooperatives that really maximize appreciation and ownership, and then nonprofit co-ops that prioritize affordability. So in a limited equity co-op, a percentage of the ownership stays with the building or with the co-op, and a percentage of it goes with the members when they exit, so that there is some amount of appreciation and ownership, but we're not maximizing the amount of appreciation because we're not extracting value and passing it on to the individual. Residents can earn equity over time, and so similar to a mortgage, to a typical mortgage, they would gain appreciation over the length of the time that they're there. But we're going to cap how much they can earn. So this is 300 Sumner Street in Boston. It's an artist-oriented limited equity cooperative, so you have to be a creator to live there, or have some affiliation with the arts. And then they have, I believe, some shared display space at the bottom of the property. So sometimes you'll find these spaces that are designed for more of a live work element, or allowing for some other aspect of the community's identity. Limited equity cooperatives, like nonprofit co-ops, also typically have a shared labor system, and like co-housing, have agreements, and then also have democratic governance. Some of them have more shared space, and some of them have more public space, and it just depends on the physical structure that they're in. So some of the pros of limited equity co-ops: you're maintaining affordability while also offering some level of equity. And they can come in all types of configurations. So you can put a limited equity structure in a multifamily property. You can put it in a single family property. The cons are, of course, if you're really focused on appreciation as a strategy in your housing, that's limited. And oftentimes with limited equity co-ops, you have to income qualify. So it puts some challenges on economic diversity of a community, but really emphasizes affordability. And then the other con is just there aren't that many of them, right? So I think there's a tendency in how we think about housing institutionally to be either affordable housing or market rate, and nothing in between. So I'm an advocate for the in between. And then co-housing, I won't spend too much time on, since everyone in this room is probably pretty familiar with co-housing and how it might differentiate here. But in co-housing, the ownership of the building belongs to the individual members. So you own your townhome or your condo, and everyone has their own front door, and then there's additional infrastructure that's shared. And also often includes, similar to the other models that we've been talking about, community management, shared labor, labor systems, and then community space. So here is a little bit of a comparison guide for how we think about the movement of equity, whether it's staying with the organization or whether it's staying with the individuals, how we might share expenses, and then how we are sharing space with each other, right? So, and then whether or not we participate in democratic management. So I would say, like, the through line for collectives and community housing and community rooted housing, as we're now saying, is this emphasis on democratic management and an emphasis on connection, understanding that how equity flows, or the physical structures that we're sitting in, can be different. I just talked a lot, so I don't know if there are, if we want to just do questions at the end, or if there are any clarifying ones now. I can't see the chat.
I haven't seen any clarifying questions, Sarah, but certainly invite everyone to submit questions via chat and we will have Q&A. So,
Cool.
so keep
Thanks. Great. So we'll transition now a little into kind of what I'm seeing in the marketplace. And my work is really rooted here in Colorado, so I can mostly speak to what's happening here at home. But initially, when we launched our co-buying class and started talking with groups of people that were interested in creating some kind of community vision, the conversation really was rooted in affordability, right? This feeling of I want to own something and I don't have access to it, and so how can I do it? But then after COVID, we saw a lot of people coming together out of a desire not just to establish ownership and a need around affordability, but really choosing to be closer together, right? We also use the phrase of communities of proximity, and I started to get a lot of people who were best friends looking to live closer to each other, or people that were wanting to have children at the same time and wanting that support network, multi-generational families that had the younger generation that needed more space, and then the older generation that needed less space and wanting to find different ways to make that happen. People that were coming together over a shared identity, that wanted to create more safety by being together. So what started as a need around affordability, I think, has grown into a desire, or a choice to live a more connected life and to find the path to that, that is accessible to them. Oh. Great. So what are some of the tools that allow us to do that? First, I'll talk just a little bit about land trusts. Um, Land trusts are a model in which we remove the value of the land underneath in order to create greater affordability for the buildings on top of the land. So a nonprofit, or a nonprofit trust often will own the land, and that purchase will be subsidized by an institutional partner, so that we can create or convert existing buildings into more affordable options, oftentimes for the people who are there who are maybe in danger of displacement. So this is a group of the San Francisco Community Land Trust that purchased some land in Chinatown to prevent displacement of residents there. And they purchased that land and converted it into 21 units of cooperative housing that are now permanently affordable and really focused on keeping those folks in place. We have another example of this here in Denver. We have the Globeville Elyria Swansea Coalition. They're a group of neighborhoods that have been traditionally low income, traditionally Black and brown neighborhoods, and the gentrification has sort of swarmed around them, and a lot of those families have been displaced, and so there's a group of organizers that are preserving the houses there one by one and converting them to affordable communities, so that neighborhood can really be preserved. The East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative is also a really inspiring solution. If people haven't heard of them, I definitely encourage you to go and look at what they've done, because it's been a really inspiring group of folks. They've purchased apartment buildings, commercial property, and individual houses to prevent displacement in the East Bay. And then another tool that we can integrate into community housing is permanently affordable housing, or capital A affordable housing. So in those instances, there's often some subsidy that comes from the institution, or from a municipal partner or an institutional foundation partner, in order to preserve the housing in perpetuity for people at a lower income. So often buyers must earn no less than 50% of their area median income, or no more than 80%. And so those limits are variable based on based on the city or the county that you're in. And there are certainly co-housing communities that have integrated affordable housing, and I think that's a really wonderful tool to create economic diversity, because economic diversity also invites other forms of diversity as well. Next, I'll talk a little bit about co-buying. Co-buying is the majority of what I do. Co-buying is two or more unrelated people that are purchasing a property together. And that can oftentimes be friends. It can be multiple parts of a family. It can be two couples purchasing a property together. I think when I talk about co-buying, a lot of people think that it's going to be lots and lots of people purchasing a property together, or that you would maybe be paired with someone that you wouldn't know in purchasing a property together. But we really focus on getting groups of people that are already formed, giving them the tools that are needed in order to execute a vision that they have. We also have some tools that we've used before where if you want to co-invest in the property, but you're not wanting to occupy the property, we've had groups like that where there are levels of investment or ownership. Co-buying is definitely the fastest growing segment of owners in the US, and now represent almost 1 in 3 of all transactions. So from our perspective, we're really focused on how can we give people access to those tools and some of the maybe the interpersonal support that's needed to create agreements that are going to protect them. This is an example. These were actually my very first co-buyers that I supported back in 2019. In this instance, we had a group where individually they were not able to afford much. Mark, who's here in the middle, had received a pretty significant inheritance from a relative, but is an artist and a musician and didn't have a W-2 income that would allow him to qualify for a mortgage. While Christina and Kelsey, his two friends, also pictured here, were single parents and didn't have significant down payment funds because of needing to support children, but had very stable W-2 income. And so combining their 3 financial profiles, we were able to find them a large home on a big parcel of land that they were able to live in comfortably together. So co-buyers use traditional conventional mortgages. It is in many ways a financial marriage that they're entering into, because everyone is on the deed and everyone is on the mortgage. And then we support the co-buyer agreement that they have, which stipulates like what happens in the event of an exit, who is going to who's going to contribute what to the mortgage, how does appreciation change over time, right? Really outlining all of the different scenarios around exits and or accounting, so that we're making sure all of those agreements are clear at the beginning and not something that we're addressing when a problem arises. We're also seeing buyers that are adding accessory dwelling units. Colorado has had some good legislation in recent years to allow for more ADUs on properties. And we also use some loopholes, I would say, in the zoning code to allow for multi-unit living in a single family home. And that can include like adding additional kitchens, for example, to a property to allow it to live more like a duplex or a triplex. One thing that I've started to see with my clients is an interest in purchasing multifamily property and dividing that, so small scale apartment buildings. It used to be that in order to purchase 2 to 4 units, you had to have 25% down, and now you can actually purchase up to 4 units with the conventional loan with as little as 5% down. So I have several groups right now that are looking at small scale rental properties that they can purchase with a relatively low down payment. And I think there's, I think especially an opportunity coming up here in pretty short order, because a lot of commercial lending products where we might have had landlords buying buildings of this scale. Many of them refinanced their loans in 2020 or 2021 when interest rates were extremely low. And many of those had 5-year terms. So my guess, if I had a crystal ball, is that we might see some landlords trying to divest those properties as they have to renew at a much higher interest rate. So I'm really interested in seeing opportunities like this one come on the market. Here's an example. In South Denver, we have this 4-unit property for 1.275 that has some individual yards, certainly could have more shared space if we got rid of some of that fencing and reworked some of that parking. But that's going to allow access to ownership of a community-oriented housing option for $318,000, which would make it some of the most affordable co-housing that we have in the state. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to purchase small-scale multifamily like this and convert it into a smaller version of intentional community. And I'm seeing a lot of people look at like, okay, what does it look like if I have a community of 6 or 7 instead of needing to think about a community of 20 units? And that's which can be especially difficult if you're wanting to live in an urban center where there isn't a lot of land left. I want to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that I'm seeing. This is a developer that I'm working with here in Denver. We actually just had a meeting today to revisit some potential sites. He is really focused on building a large single family home that would fit on any 50-foot lot in the United States and would have 6 units in quotation marks because there would not be a full kitchen in each one. So you would have, you can see here, this is the front porch entrance, and then there are suites on this first floor. So you have a small living room, a small dining room, a little private patio, 2 bedrooms with a Jack and Jill bath on each side. So a small but practical living space for individuals. And then on the 3rd floor, we would have what would essentially be the common house in this community. So a large dining room, a large living room, a big shared kitchen with pantry space for each household, a library and a little kids play area, along with an outdoor patio and some playground equipment in the back. So the idea here is that we could take a single family home lot and then convert it into 6 units of community oriented housing. So I feel really excited about this one because it is an opportunity around infill development, which is not something we do a lot of in the United States. We see a lot of like, I'm going to buy farmland and convert it into 150 units of housing, but this individual lot redevelopment isn't something that we see a lot of. I'm also seeing people doing a lot of, hacking their space or hacking their zoning. I've had some clients who talk to me about wanting to put additional bedrooms in the backyard, wanting to put tiny homes in place. And there are a lot of rules in the building code and zoning code for sleeping units or for permanent occupancy of units. There are not as many rules for what needs to be in a backyard office. So I have had some clients who are building structures where people may or may not sleep that are permitted more as an office as opposed to being permitted as a separate living unit because they're sharing bathrooms and kitchens in the main house. And then seeing people get creative around tiny homes, RVs, yurts. There is a community in New Mexico where the zoning code doesn't call it a house unless it's on a foundation. So there are houses that are built on stilts to indicate, like basically to prevent from being counted as a structure. I want to be clear that I'm certainly not advocating for people to circumvent a code that is based around health and safety. But I think if we're looking at ways to get creative around still complying with code and allowing for more space and more occupancy. There's a lot of ways to do that and to advocate for that. I kind of said this already with that 4-unit building, but I think there's a ton of opportunity in converting existing buildings. This is a property in my neighborhood that I walk by a lot of days and have a big crush on and would love to see developed into co-housing. It's a 10,000 square foot. It was originally built as a 10,000 square foot single family home. It's been converted into 8 units. If we were to convert those, if we were to convert 7 of the units into condos or to ownership housing and keep one of those units as a common house, we could have an average price of just over $450,000 per unit, which is on par with the cost of condos and market rate homes in this community. So it would provide access to co-housing or community rooted housing at the same price as market rate housing instead of above market rate, which is what we see with a lot of the co-housing communities here in Colorado, is that you're paying more for access to community. So I think a lot of my work is about how do we have you pay the same or less to have access to community, that it shouldn't be something that's only available to people that can afford to pay an overage. Okay, so a couple of community examples. This is my house. This is Queen City Cooperative. We're a 4,000 square foot home in the Capitol Hill neighborhood of Denver. We have cooperative governance, so we meet every Monday night and have dinner together twice a week and talk about the management of the home. We created a limited equity structure for our house. As far as I know, we are the only limited equity cooperative that has been used in a single family home. So most limited equity cooperatives are use an apartment model or a condo model. For us, we created a system in which people can earn their bedroom, basically. So people pay a mini mortgage on their bedroom, and then they also pay to occupy the common space, kind of like a mini HOA. And the total cost for your your bedroom payment and your common house payment is about $900 a month. We later expanded to add an additional home and also expanded to purchase the former carriage house for our property, which we run as a guest house. So if anyone's visiting Denver and they want to stay at Queen City, you'd certainly be welcome to do that. We have, I think, a very diverse community right now. When we started, we were very much a group of people in our 30s. Now our ages range, this slide is a little bit old, our ages range from 5 to 52. Most of the residents in their 20s and 30s, most of them between 60 and 70% of the area median income. We don't require low income status to live here, but it does show up that way in terms of who's choosing or who we have prioritized giving space to. But this includes a lot of teachers, first responders, food service workers, nonprofit managers, lots of civil servants, a very high percentage of LGBTQ residents. I'll also just take a moment to say that there is a very strong history of collective housing among the queer population, especially coming from a generation of folks that were maybe not welcome in their blood families and found refuge in collectives. So there's a rich history there. And then about 28% of our residents are people of color. So we've reached some level of race diversity as well. And that took, all of that diversity and all of that shifting, I think, took us establishing ourselves as a community and really prioritizing those values. Let me check my time. Okay. We bought our house for $680,000. We bought it with 10% down and we did a 10% home equity line of credit. All of the residents participate in cooperative governance. So I think our house is a sort of a form of home ownership light, where everyone is doing that maintenance work together. Everyone is participating in how we want to see the house work together, what improvements we're going to make, and we distribute labor equally based on the amount of time that it takes. The other thing I think that's true of cooperatives and perhaps also of co-housing communities is that we can always restructure or reconsider the rules and agreements that we make as long as we get to consensus. We bought our house initially in 2015. We used funds. So in 2020, we used funds from the appreciation of that first house to buy the guest house and take down the fence in between those two properties. In 2022, we purchased a second property and we added 5 co-op shares to our network. And now we're ready to buy our next project. I'm hoping to buy our neighbor's house on the other side and would be really excited to create some opportunities for more families to live inside of this structure. Another example, this was my largest co-buyer group. This is Pando Cooperative. They bought their home last year. Pando is the name of the largest aspen grove in the United States, which I find cool and didn't know. It's a cool co-op name. But they are a group of friends that were connected and lived in community housing in college. And so many of them continued to live together into early adulthood and started to feel like they wanted to be connected for longer and wanted access to ownership. So they sought me out and we found them a large duplex property that one side of the duplex, the basement had been converted into a secondary unit, and then the other side was a large another large side of the property that they converted and added another kitchen. So it is technically and legally a duplex, but it has 4 kitchens inside of it, and they're occupying it as 8 adults. And it was really cool to be a part of their process because they were really intentional about how appreciation and equity would work, recognizing that not all of them were coming from the same background of access to ownership. And so they created some interesting stuff around different levels of appreciation based on what class system you were coming from. So pretty disruptive. And then the last one that I'll mention is the People's Mansion. This was a really long a long process. But this is a 12,000 square foot historic landmark building pretty close to Queen City. It was run for almost 30 years as a butler school. So it was a place where servants would come, servants would come and learn how to be a live-in servant or a nanny or a maid, and the owners were really sort of training the working class of the uber rich. On Thursday, the first residents will be moving in to what will now be the first city-funded affordable housing cooperative in Denver. And this, so out front, this is me and Lincoln, the executive director of the Boulder Housing Coalition, who purchased the building out front on closing day. A lot really had to come into play for this to happen. The first is it was a landmark property, which means that we can't change the building envelope. So we paid $2.8 million for this property. The land underneath it, because of proximity to downtown, is probably worth more than that. But because it had a landmarked building on it, no one could purchase it to tear it down. So what is the highest and best use of a giant single family home? We think it's a cooperative. But the home had sat on the market for more than 3 years. And had been kind of all over the place in terms of price. So it created an opportunity for us. We also were able to convince the city of Denver to qualify subsidy for us based on the number of bedrooms that we were going to supply instead of the number of front doors. So a lot of municipalities, when they're looking at your project and considering how they might provide subsidy, they're looking at how many units are you creating. So we, through a long process with them, were able to land on bedroom units, not apartment units. So we got a $1 million grant from the city of Denver for acquisition on this property. And that was that number was so high because we were able to prove that we were going to create 19 units of affordable housing in an existing structure. The other thing that came together for this to happen was we passed House Bill 1007 in Colorado, was passed in 2024. That's a bill that made it impossible for municipalities to write rules based on people living together based on blood relationship. So we had a rule in the books that said no more than 2 unrelated people are allowed to occupy a single family home. 2 people is how many were living in this house when we bought it. But we believe and advocated for many years that that we should base occupancy on building and fire code that's centered around safety and not make different restrictions for people who are related to each other versus not related to each other. And we were fortunate to have a governor who agrees with that and push that forward at the state level. So as of July of last year, this property became possible, and also our house where we have been living for 9 years, we were now occupying legally for the first time because we had been occupying in violation of the zoning code. So, and then we also had a friendly seller because the property had been on the market for so long. When we approached with a year-long contract, she was willing to wait it out with us and figure it out. So we didn't have to purchase the property and then make loan payments on it while we figured out the institutional support aspect, which is something a lot of developers have to do. So we were lucky in that way to have this major win. So I believe that is the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take questions. If folks want to scan this QR code or want to email me, I do have a newsletter that I put out about once a month. It's primarily based on what's happening in Colorado, but might have some things that are useful to people that are interested in seeing what's happening here or kind of how we're thinking about these different housing options.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sarah. I think we do have some questions for you. We've got a little under 15 minutes for questions. So if you have questions, put them in the chat. I've gone ahead and pulled some from the chat and I'll just toss them to you, Sarah, so that you don't have to sift through that. So lots of questions about limited equity model. So I'll kind of combine these, but folks are wondering, does the limited equity model require some kind of investment upfront in order to make buying in affordable? And then as well as if you can speak to any common legal or zoning barriers, knowing that they say they know every town or city is different, but if there's common barriers to know about, that would be helpful.
Yeah. In terms of requiring an initial investment upfront, yes, limited equity models do require that you're facilitating the acquisition, which means if you're paying market rate for the property, then someone is going to have to facilitate that market rate purchase. In our case, my partner and I, we basically thought of the down payment investment and structured it as a loan to the cooperative that would be paid back over time. That has a different so we had a 5% interest rate that we paid basically back to ourselves over time once the co-op could afford it. And that helped to for us to feel like we were being made whole for our initial investment, even though we were, quote unquote, giving up the access to the market rate appreciation. So it does require some initial investment. I think that there are opportunities for institutional partners or nonprofits to step into that role. I don't think it has to be an individual because that's a pretty big ask of someone to kind of forfeit that market rate return. But we were able to do that with our model. In terms of legal and zoning barriers specifically around limited equity, I don't think there are rules around limiting the amount of money that you take. So I like that part of it. I don't see barriers to around zoning or legal agreements, but you I will say we spent a fair amount of time and money working with the co-op attorney on our bylaws to make sure that the appreciation elements were really clearly spelled out. And I'm also happy to share those bylaws or those agreements with people because we share them all the time.
Great. Along those lines of lawyers, someone is wondering, how do you find lawyers to create the various policies, and can you share anything about typical fees for creating those legal docs? Sorry, I know you're trying to unshare your screen too.
Yeah, here. Um, So we found a couple of friendly lawyers that were interested in our concept and wanted to help us. So I can't necessarily speak to what those fees would be, and I think that they're kind of different based on the community that you're in. I will say that we started working with a co-op attorney, and they had primarily worked in worker cooperatives, and we found that working with a real estate attorney made more sense. I think a real estate attorney is a better place to start. And then we've also gotten a fair amount of support on the co-buyer agreements with contract attorneys. So it tends to be a little bit of a mix, and there were times when we were educating them on kind of what we knew, and then they would do research. So I would also encourage you to, whatever attorney you hire, to negotiate them not charging you when they are learning something.
Fair recommendation, thanks. More just specific questions about limited equity cooperatives. I'm really glad to hear there's so much interest in this area. Someone is wondering if there are any limited equity co-ops with financial templates or a willingness to share how they calculate equity over time. And then this person is also curious, what happens when someone needs to move, or what's the process for getting their equity returned?
Yeah. Um, So sorry, can you say the first part again?
Yeah, they were just wondering if there are co-ops with financial templates or like
Got it.
any,
Okay.
those are available.
So I can share that with our property, we have a fixed rate of appreciation. So the average appreciation rate in Colorado is 6% per year. We have a fixed rate of appreciation at 3%. So there are some years where our appreciation, like this year, for example, I think in the Denver metro, the appreciation rate is more like 1 or 2%. So the shares in our co-op will appreciate more this year. But when during COVID, when we had 10 or 12% appreciation rate, our appreciation rate was still 3%. So in our model, we chose a fixed rate of appreciation so that people can see, what is my share going to be worth 5, 10, 15 years from now. Other organizations will do it more like how traditional affordable housing does it, where it's a percentage of whatever market rate appreciation has happened. And that usually uses the market reports. So you would want to outline in your ownership agreements how that appreciation is calculated. We chose an easy one because we wanted it to be simple. So I'm in favor of that because it makes it clear. I will say that we do also have a stipulation in our agreements that the board can adjust it if we feel like if we feel like things have depreciated so much that the value of the share is no longer equal to the market. But we decided to start the ownership prices of our shares really low. So something would have to go really, really wrong in Denver or some really like catastrophic market adjustment for us to no longer be market rate. And then um, like the exchange of shares or the exchange of your ownership agreement. So exits are, potentially the most complex part of it. It's easy to get people to come together. It's more challenging when their life plans don't line up, or one person wants to leave and the others want to stay. So exits are definitely something that we cover pretty heavily in the co-buyer agreement for people that are sharing ownership. For limited equity cooperatives, because the payout is less than what we would have in a market rate calculation. So our model is that you have to sell your share back to the co-op, and then the co-op makes your share available to new people. To date, we've been able to pay people out what we owe them upon their exit because of the reserves that we keep in place. But uh, we do have a stipulation that we can take up to 5 years to pay you back if we don't have the assets to do it at the time. And that's really based on like not wanting to create a run on the bank if everyone if everyone leaves at once. We don't want to endanger the housing.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. And then we've got one last question. There's a lot of great recommendations happening in the chat of examples, case studies, organizations. So thanks to all of you for populating the chat with all of that. But someone is wondering just about which of these models can be combined. We talk about that a lot in co-housing. Just, co-housing can also be an eco-village. It can also be a cooperative. So can you speak about intersections a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I think, we kind of already mentioned in the examples that land trusts and cooperatives can be combined. I know, Brian Bowen has talked a lot about like, can we convert the common house into a cooperative in a co-housing community? So, we could go one step further and say, let's turn the common house in a co-housing community into a limited equity co-op, so that we're providing some access to ownership where like the majority of the common house is owned by the community, but a section of it can be divided or divided into an equity payout for people, so that everyone has literal and figurative ownership in the community. I think that would help to like stabilize power differential that happens with ownership and non-ownership, or like how to relate to renters. I mean, I think there's a ton of intersectionality, right? And I think that's like what we're also talking about as an organization is all of these different ways that we live together, and thinking about the different the different outputs that each of these containers has, and how do we place them together.
Yep. Perfect last words. Thank you so much, Sarah Wells. Thank you to the Beccas and Lori Frank, our board president, to Rains and Neil for all of your support behind the scenes. I've got a few things I want to share with you before I let you all go to the rest of your day. So again, we're just at the beginning of National Co-Housing Week. So tomorrow we'll be gathering to do a Pacific Northwest spotlight. And then we'll learn about seniors in co-housing, both senior co-housing communities and seniors in multi-generational communities. So join us tomorrow for that. And then on Thursday, we'll do a spotlight on the West and Southwest, including Colorado. And we'll do a storytelling event. We have a few hand-picked storytellers, and then we'll also have an interactive portion for folks to share why community is important, especially now. So we hope that you can join us. Again, all of these sessions, including today, are recorded. Thank you, Rains, for mentioning it might take us a week or so to get all these recordings out to you. But trust that if you're registered, if you're here, if you're on our list, you will receive those recordings. And just a reminder that that new member deal is still active. Hoping that someone can post those links in the chat once more for our new members. We hope that you can join us. And finally, we are, again, a small nonprofit with a big mission to create a more connected, sustainable, and democratic future through co-housing and many forms of community-rooted housing. And we can only do this with your support. So scan this QR code, unless that little annotate button is on your side too, or click this link. Remember that even a small gift goes a long way. We really appreciate your support. And I thank you all for being here today, and I hope to see you the rest of the week. Thank you so much.